will talk as he said, but interject questions as I go if I say something that sparks your interest. I want this to kind of be more of a dialogue. So first off, I want to say I'm obviously very young. I'm 31 years old. I think this is the first time we've ever had two people in their 30s running for the House of Representatives in Springfield, which is pretty exciting. I say that because my background, which I'll go over a little bit more, but part of that time was spent in Jefferson City working there while I was in school. And almost everybody who is representing us is 55 or older because it's not a huge income, and it takes a lot of energy to get elected. And so oftentimes we have a lot of older folks who are able to financially, but then also just personally run for office and win. So I'm really excited that win or lose, we have two younger people representing an area that has Evangel, Drury, OTC, MSU, all of downtown. And so I think that it'll be a pretty good reflection versus what we're used to. So a little bit about me. I am from the Rogersville area, if any of you are familiar with that. I went to school in Missouri State. I am a first generation high school graduate. My mom waited tables her whole life, still does, and she was a single mom most of my life. And then my stepfather worked in a factory and worked his way up until he retired. And so I'm actually the first of all my siblings, of all my family, to graduate high school. And so some of you in the room may know what that means. For someone my age to be the first to graduate is not so normal now. I think it was more normal maybe 20 years ago. But with that came a lot of trying to figure out what next steps are, filling out the FAFSA by myself, going to college and doing all of that alone, and really trying to understand that as a 17-year-old was not easy. And so I went to Missouri State, only school I applied to because I didn't know anything else. And so I went there, graduated with a whole lot of debt. I have about $30,000 in debt, and my degree's in social work. So I say all that because I think that's important to just know where I come from. And I won't go into the nitty-gritty details of my life or anything like that, because what I feel like my experiences moving forward really qualified me to do this. So when I was studying social work at Missouri State, I took a policy course. And when you go into social work, you say, I want to help people. That's my goal, right? And I really didn't know what I wanted to do or what direction I wanted to go in, but I knew I wanted to make a difference. And I took this policy course with a professor and really realized that there were so many things that in our state and in our federal government that are prohibiting people like social workers being able to help their clients. Then I kind of dig deeper, and it's really more that our legislation affects so much of our lives, everything we do, down minimum wages and what that looks like, and what our college tuition is, how much the schools get from the legislature, education funding. So then I started to get really interested in politics. I come from a super conservative family. As he said, I am a Democrat, so I've had an evolution, but I kind of consider myself a moderate. But it was really digging through that where I realized I want to do something with this, and I want to learn more. So as a social work senior, you have to do a practicum. Most social work students go to a local nonprofit and study there for a semester and earn their credits and graduate. I decided I want to go to Jefferson City and intern. So I had to convince the social work department, the political science department, and the legislative internship program in Jefferson City to allow me to do this. I was the first social work student at Missouri State to go through the legislative internship program. It was not easy to convince them that social work and legislation make sense together because not everybody saw it the way I did. But I got it done. Since then, we've had a few more students to go through that program, which is great. But when I got to Jeff City, so I did a semester there, and this gentleman asked me earlier when I decided I was going to do this. It was when I was like 20. And I get to Jeff City, and I don't know if any of you have been there. Has anybody gone to Jeff City when they're in session, lobbied for things? If you haven't gone, I encourage you to go. It's a really eye-opening experience, and kind of in a bad way, in my opinion. When I got there, it was the second week there, and I go into the chamber where they have their debates, and we have 163 state representatives in Missouri, and there were about 20 in the room during this debate, and I couldn't tell you what it was about. But I remember standing there and listening to them and just wondering, where is everybody? And then they rang a bell, and everybody ran in, voted exactly the way their parties told them to, like to the point where they're asking their colleagues, how are we voting on this? Because they didn't even know what the bill was. And they all vote, and then they turn out and left again. And I remember standing there just like, this isn't real. Like this, I went there really hopeful, like, yay, change, government. And it was really disheartening, is the best word I have for that. And so it was at that exact moment where I said, okay, most young people don't care about politics, don't care about government. They don't vote. People always say our voting generation is a waste of time. Don't talk to them because they don't vote. So I could be like the statistic of my generation and just say, okay, this is crazy, I'm gonna go back to social work and start working for social services or something, or I could just dig in, and that's what I decided to do. So upon graduation, graduated on Friday, on Monday, I started working for the United States Senate. I got a job doing constituent services for a Missouri senator, and essentially what that is you help Missourians cut through the red tape when dealing with agencies. So you may have a veteran who isn't getting his benefits and is getting the runaround from the agency, so they can call their representatives or their senators and ask for help. And so I did that for a few years, and it was super frustrating, and you'll hear me say that word a lot. But it was frustrating, because here we have citizens, whether they were veterans or just trying to get a passport, who had to call and ask for help because we make it so hard to get anything done when dealing with government that they have to actually call in favors from their senator, which is crazy. I did that for a few years, and then around 2008, I quit that and went and worked in politics for a bit. I went and worked for a campaign. I worked for Organizing for America, which was the grassroots organization that started after Obama won his election. So it was kind of his campaign transition. And it started as a non-political thing. My job was to teach communities and empower them to advocate for themselves. So it was sitting with folks, and this is how you write the letter to the editor. This is how you go to your city council and talk to them, and really trying to give people the power to speak their voices. About halfway through that, we got farmed out on a Senate campaign for Missouri. And so I ended up running an entire field program for a campaign in Southwest Missouri. I hated every second of it. I worked 150 days without a day off, 12-hour days. And I'll pause there and say I have kids. At the time I had 2 stepchildren that were pretty young, that we have custody of, and then now we've got a younger one. And so it was pretty trying on our family, but we did it, and it was a great learning experience. We had a lot of great friends and learned the value of volunteers and treating people with dignity and respect and building relationships with people. So then, you have that relationship later in life. So I learned a lot from that process. Then I decided, when the campaign was over and it was really intense, to go back to nonprofit work. I currently work for a local nonprofit called Care to Learn, and I actually love my job. What we do is we raise funds to help children and school districts provide basic needs for their kids. So we buy things like eyeglasses, medicine, hygiene products, anything that's keeping a kid from being successful in school. But what's really cool about our organization is that, again, I am teaching people and I'm empowering people to raise money in their own communities to then spend on their own children in whatever way they choose. There's no income qualifications or anything for the kids. So if a teacher sees a kid needs a pair of shoes, they buy it immediately, no questions asked, no paperwork. And so my experience with government and seeing all the red tape and the things that people had to deal with to get what they needed, this nonprofit was perfect for me, because there are no qualifications or anything. If the kid needs help, we're going to do it so that they can learn and be successful. So I worked there for about 4.5 years. I still work there, and I absolutely love my job. We work all across the state of Missouri and partner with school districts. So I've learned a whole lot about the education program, our funding, and just what our teachers are up against, what our families are dealing with, and it's a really great place to be. So when I decided to run, let's go back to your question. When I was standing in the chamber at like 19, however old I was, and I decided that I wanted to dig in. I didn't know at the time that I wanted to one day run for office. I knew I wanted to do something because legislation is so important to everything that we do. But it's been the experiences over time that I've really hammered down that this was a great fit for me. He asked me earlier what my long-term goals were. I don't plan to run for governor one day. I don't plan to do anything else. If I do, awesome. I love the nonprofit I work for. And for me, it's really about trying to make a difference for the clients that we serve and the families that I've come across during this election and over the years and things that I've been doing. While working on campaigns and in my own volunteer time, and then of course now while I'm running for office, I've had a lot of conversations. I've built a lot of relationships with people. And there's a lot of consistencies in the problems that Missourians are facing, whether that's not having livable wages or trying to work multiple jobs and not having transportation, access to health care, education funding not being fully funded. And I'll get into semantics later about my positions on things if you all want me to, but the biggest thing for me was I kept hearing these stories of people, regular working class people like my family, who are working, wanting to survive and wanting to work really hard, but they're still up against all of these walls. A big one that comes up often, and it's something I'm hugely advocating for, we have a lot of families right now on services. So we've got food stamps, we've got Medicaid, we've got all these services, daycare subsidies that help people like my mom, who is a single parent working 2 jobs, they need some help. And so we've got these services in place. Everyone, Republican or Democrat, agrees that we don't want people to live on these services, right? Some people have different opinions of what that looks like. But one thing that I've learned through talking to people and building these relationships, in Missouri right now, say you're getting a daycare subsidy. Daycare, I've got a 2-year-old, can be anywhere up to $800 a month or more, depending on where you go. And so if you're a working parent making minimum wage, that's a huge amount of your income. It makes it almost worthless to go to work every day. So Missouri has a subsidy for that. So if you're working, you can get a certain amount of money. Let's say it's $400 a month to send your kids to daycare. If you make over an income bracket, whatever this is, just imaginary line, if you take a pay raise that ends up being $50 a month, could be 50 cents an hour, then you will lose all of that $400 subsidy. And so one of the things I've learned while walking this area, and if you're familiar with this area, we've got a lot of low-income folks, a lot of transiency, is that our families are having to turn down pay raises or turn down extra hours because they can't do it. Like if someone said to me, you get $50 more a month, but I'm going to take $400 away from you, I'm going to laugh and say, no, thank you. I'm going to stay right where I'm at. I'm okay right here. And so that's an example of legislation that is keeping people from being able to succeed when they want to further their lives. My husband works in IT, and he had a coworker who is a professional, but he's taking care of his parents, his children, his wife, and they get a small amount of food stamps. And he actually had to say to him, can I not accept this raise? Because if I do, I'm going to lose all my food stamps. I appreciate you guys. I want to keep working here, but I can't do both. I can't take this tiny raise and lose all of this support right now. We're just not in a place to do it. 3 years later, he's off food stamps. He's doing great. But that is an example where laws are keeping people from moving forward. Other states have done amazing things where they've implemented sliding scales. So you take a pay raise, you create some savings, and then you jump down, and then you keep doing that. And it really empowers people to move forward if they're able to and willing. So anyway, I kind of got in the weeds for a second, but that's an example of something that is a really easy fix at legislation levels, bipartisan support. Everybody likes getting people off the services, and it's just not being discussed. And so through these conversations and the things that I've learned, for me, it's really been that we don't have anybody in Jefferson City that I know of who comes from my background and really has a good understanding of the struggles that middle-class families and low-income folks are dealing with. I come from a very low-income family. I'm that rare statistic that made it out, but now I work hand-in-hand with people who are struggling or on the brink of one huge medical bill from struggling. And we don't have people making laws right now who understand that. It takes somebody really having to turn down a pay raise to think about that. And when I talk to Republicans or Democrats, the Chamber of Commerce, about that issue, it just makes sense. Like, well, yeah, okay, let's let them save for 6 months and then take down some of their subsidies. And in 3 years, they'll be off food stamps. Awesome. So I'm really running to try to bring that perspective to Jefferson City, the perspective of somebody who comes from a working class family, who knows what it's like to sell your furniture on Craigslist to pay your bills, because I've done that many times, I still do, and try to juggle work and family and do it all at the same time successfully. I'm in a position where I'm able to do this. I have a great support network, and so I feel like it's kind of my responsibility to step forward, since so few people who come from my background are able to do so. So that's where I'm at. I want to talk a little bit about what it's like to run for office, because it's weird. It's really been I've worked campaigns, I've done staff, but to actually be a candidate is really crazy. Huffington Post wrote about my primary. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Huffington Post, but it's a national website, paper, and they actually talked about my race, which was crazy in itself. And so what's been the most interesting thing is, one, you've got to prove yourself, right? So I walk in the room, I look much younger than my than 30s. I know that. And when I'm in jeans and a t-shirt, I look like a 12-year-old boy, and I know that. And so every day when I leave to go to Lowe's, I'm like, I gotta put on makeup. And anyway, so you got to prove that you're legitimate, right? And fortunately, I've worked in the nonprofit sector, hand in hand with the city, and I served on a lot of boards and stuff. So I had some of that coming to the table. Some people know who I am, but I was up against a 65-year-old lawyer in town for my first primary, and that's a big deal. As Mr. Crocker said, he was probably the most well-known Democrat in Springfield. Actually, I think the paper said that. He was the most influential person. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm up against this guy, and I will say I put my name in the hat first. And when he decided he wanted to run, I invited him to coffee. We sat down and tried to hash it out. Because we believed almost the same thing on everything. But he decided we wanted to keep running, and so I just worked harder and smarter than he did, and won with 65% of the vote, which is a pretty big deal in Springfield with our voter turnout like it is. But so you've got to figure out a whole lot of stuff. You got to prove your legitimacy, and then it's like, what am I going to say? I obviously have no problem talking. I'm a social worker. I like to talk about everything. Everything is interconnected to me. It's like you talk about living wages, and we need to adjust what that means for the cliff effect, like I just talked about. We've got to look at all these things that affect each other. And too many times we just pass laws and don't worry about the unintended consequences of things. And so when I'm trying to consider like my messaging, what am I going to say to people, that in itself was huge. And then it's like, hey, I've got to raise money. For my nonprofit, I can buy a hot meal for a kid for $1.50. When I entered this race, they told me I had to raise $100,000. And I vomited inside my mouth and went home and cried, because that's a whole lot of food for kids that I've got to spend on this. Because if you don't know, in Missouri there are no campaign contribution limits, and our ethics laws are ranked 49th in the entire country. I can buy.
I'm sorry. Yes. $100,000.
Yes, I've already raised and spent $50,000.
Oh, good.
And I'm not done. It's terrible. But so all that said, that was really hard for me to process ethically as a person who raises money to do really good things in the community, to then know that I've got to raise money for me. That's a hard ask, right? I can sit down with a donor and say, I need all this money for children. People like to give money to help kids, and then to say, believe in me, invest in me, because I'm going to make change. It's a really difficult thing to do. So I had to, grapple with that emotionally and just ethically, like I said. And then on top of that, you've got to convince people to help you, right? I've knocked 12,000 times. I say I have knocked 12,000 times since last year. To win my primary, we did 11,500 door knocks. It's a whole lot of people. And I couldn't do it alone, right? So I had to find people to volunteer with me. And so I had to sit down and build those relationships. A lot of them came from my previous work, but convince these people to invest in me and to believe in what I was doing enough to sweat in 105-degree temperatures in the month of August and knock doors with me. And then there's phone calling, there's all that stuff. And then I've got a household, right? So I've got 3 kids, I've got a husband. My mother-in-law, fortunately, lives with us. It's a mutually beneficial kind of thing. But we have a great support network, but I've got kids, right? And if any of you have children in this room, you want to be at home and raise them. Fortunately, I was able to do that for the whole primary, but it is difficult. Then you have things like Huffington Post write about you. And then the newsletter calls and says, hey, what do you think about this article that Huffington Post is calling your opponent sexist and all this crazy stuff? And having to be ready to respond to that for the first time ever. And then think about your responses and, how's this going to affect me? Everything I do, whether I post on my Facebook page, what my kids wear when we go out to eat, how well behaved they are at dinner, is all now under a microscope, right? And so we knew that going in, and it was a decision that my husband and I were on board with. But it doesn't make it any easier because you know it's happening. So it's been an interesting journey. I've learned a lot, and as I said, I've knocked a whole lot of doors. So through that process, I have learned some really great stories, some really saddening stories. I talk a lot about one house I knocked. I stepped on the porch and literally fell through the porch, and the window was open, and there's this guy sitting laying back in his recliner, and he sees me fall through his porch, and I didn't fall through, but like down to my mid-calf went through, and he's mortified, and he can't get up. And I very quickly realized that this man is disabled, and he is trying to apologize through the window and he wants to help me, and I'm struggling out. And long story short, I get to talking to him. He is a renter, and in the city of Springfield, not a state issue, but in the city of Springfield, we don't have a whole lot of landlord regulations. And so this guy's porch has been broken for a long time, and his landlord won't do anything about it. So with his small disability check, he's been buying plywood, laying it on his porch. And you can see the stacks of plywood, and it molds, and then when it rains, it gets crumbly, and so I fell through his porch. You don't really understand the difficulties that people are dealing with on a super deep level until you knock their door, and you go through that process with them, and you have that serious conversation where this guy is obviously mortified, he's so embarrassed, but he can't do anything about it because he's on a limited income. His Medicaid has been slashed. He's too young for Medicare. His landlord won't do anything. He has no income. He has no family. And here he is, can barely get out of his chair, and his torch is falling